The city was suffocating beneath a heavy blanket of rain. Every drop that hit the pavement felt like a reminder of the blood that had been spilled, a blood debt Victor swore to collect. The night his brother, Samuel, was murdered haunted him like a recurring nightmare, burning in the back of his mind. The face of the killer was a ghost in the shadows, but Victor knew the streets well enough to trace the scent of death. Tonight, he was getting close. The streets he walked were empty, save for the flickering street lamps casting long, eerie shadows. He pulled his jacket tighter as the cold air bit at his skin. His mind replayed the moment he found Samuel, slumped against the alley wall, his lifeless body soaked in blood, his eyes frozen wide open as if he had seen something that terrified him in his final moments. For months, Victor had hunted for answers, piecing together fragments of information, chasing whispers, and breaking bones when he had to. Every clue pointed to one name, Raoul, a crime boss infamous for ruling the underground with an iron fist. But Raoul's hands weren't the only ones involved in his brother's death. Someone else was involved, something much more sinister, more terrifying than the men who roamed the streets with guns. Victor's journey for justice had turned into something darker, a descent into a world where the line between the living and the dead blurred. As he approached the abandoned warehouse where Raoul's men were known to meet, he felt a growing presence, like cold fingers pressing down on his spine. He entered the building cautiously, stepping into the cavernous space. The air was stale, thick with the stench of mold and decay. Dust particles floated lazily in the dim light filtering through cracked windows. Victor's every step echoed in the stillness. His hand tightened around the gun tucked under his coat, ready for a confrontation, but he knew, deep down, that what awaited him inside wasn't just flesh and blood. "Victor," a voice whispered, distant but clear. He froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He scanned the room, gun drawn, but there was no one there. "Victor." The voice came again, this time closer, like a breath on the back of his neck. Victor turned, gun raised, but only shadows greeted him. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. This was no time for games. He had to find Raoul, and that meant keeping his wits about him. But the deeper he ventured into the warehouse, the more it felt like he was walking into something alive, something watching him, waiting. The room ahead was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb, flickering on and off as though it too was struggling to stay alive. At the far end of the room stood a figure, tall and imposing, bathed in the yellowish glow of the failing light. "Raoul," Victor growled, stepping forward with his gun aimed. But as he approached, the figure didn't move. Victor's blood ran cold when he finally saw the face. It wasn't Raoul. It was Samuel. "Sam," Victor whispered, his voice breaking. His brother stood before him, but something was wrong. Samuel's skin was pale, almost translucent, his eyes sunken and lifeless. Blood seeped from a deep wound in his chest, soaking the shirt he had died in. "Why didn't you save me, Victor?" Samuel's voice was hollow, echoing unnaturally in the room. Victor stumbled backward, gripping his gun tightly, his mind reeling. "No, you're dead. This isn't real." "It's as real as the bullet they put in my heart," Samuel's ghost whispered, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "You let me die, Victor. You left me to rot in the streets. I didn't know." Victor's voice cracked, guilt crashing over him like a wave. "I didn't know they would come for you." The ghost of his brother smirked, but it wasn't the warm smile Victor remembered. It was cruel, mocking. "They didn't come for me, Victor. They came for you." Suddenly, the walls of the warehouse seemed to close in, warping and twisting as a low, guttural growl echoed through the room. Shadows shifted unnaturally, crawling along the floor like living things. Victor spun around, gun raised, but the darkness swallowed everything. He could feel it now, the evil that had taken his brother, the malevolent force behind the murder. It wasn't Raoul. Something else was pulling the strings. Victor fired his gun wildly into the darkness, but the bullets disappeared into the void. The shadows wrapped around him like cold, wet hands, dragging him down. He could feel their icy touch creeping into his skin, seeping into his bones. "You can't escape it," Samuel's voice whispered in his ear, as the shadows pulled tighter. "You can't fight the darkness." Victor screamed, thrashing against the invisible force, but it was too strong. It was everywhere, inside him, around him. The gun slipped from his grasp, clattering uselessly to the floor as he sank into the blackness. In his final moments, Victor saw it, the true face of the thing that had killed his brother. It was ancient, monstrous, a twisted mass of shadows and teeth, a force that fed on hatred and revenge. And now, it had him too. As the warehouse fell silent once more, the shadows receded, leaving only the faintest trace of their presence. Victor was gone, another victim claimed by the darkness that prowled these cursed streets, always hungry for more. Raoul would never know that he was merely a pawn in a far greater, more terrifying game. And as long as the darkness lurked, the blood would continue to flow, feeding the insatiable hunger of the thing that waited in the shadows. Justice had been served. Just not the kind Victor had hoped for.